I like the dog. It's friendly.
Hello and welcome back to my channel Box Office Poison. Today I want to take a look at Carnival of Souls. So join me as we go back in time to 1961? 1961? 1961 or 62? I'll check. Pretty sure it's 1961. Brilliant black and white classic proto-horror. That clearly inspired people like David Lynch and David Lynch, Stanley Kubrick, George Romero. It's a brilliant black and white movie that still manages to be deeply unsettling. So join me as we go back and take a look at Carnival of Souls.
I have had Carnival of Souls on my to-watch list for years, decades even. And you know how it is, you always mean to get round to watching these things, but for whatever reason, you just don't. And before you know it, you're a 41-year-old woman watching Carnival of Souls for the first time. Well, I had truly been missing out, because this film is truly deserving of the hoopla. It's a masterpiece, and I curse myself for not watching it sooner. But perhaps if I had watched it at a younger age, I may not have picked up on all the nuance and subtlety of the story. I was obviously familiar with some of the visuals before I watched it, but I didn't realise that the whole story is from the protagonist Mary Henry's point of view. And this is worth exploring. So in this video, I'm not reviewing the film as such, but more going into some of the themes that I found interesting. I'm going to assume that if you're watching this video, you've seen the film before, but if you haven't, this is your sign to go and watch it. It's a tight hour and 18 minutes long, it's genuinely unsettling, and if, like me, you like to read a little deeper into the film, you'll find plenty to think about. So this visually stunning nightmare and relatively short film with a brilliant score is an absolute must, especially for horror fans. I highly recommend it. Made in 1962, this film was released at the start of second-wave feminism and the women's liberation movement, and for me, the two main characters of Mary and the man, or the ghoul,
ghouls? Son of a bitch.
represents the emergence of second-wave feminism and the patriarchy. The film is obviously inspired by European and art house films, which lends itself well to this kind of analysis. Art house is helpfully defined by Wikipedia as a film intended to be a serious artistic work, often experimental and not designed for mass appeal, made primarily for aesthetic reasons rather than commercial profit, and contains unconventional or highly symbolic content. I couldn't have summed it up better myself. So something I wasn't expecting with this film was the intentional, or not, feminist and queer/asexual subtext. I'm sure some folk will groan loudly at the mere suggestion of feminism, and if that is you, feel free to stop watching this video and yeet yourself into the sun, because here we talk about this shit. So let's start at the very beginning. So right away, before the credits even start to roll, we are introduced to Mary, our protagonist. She's in a car with a couple of friends who are taunted into a drag race with a couple of boys. The young woman driving is looking for fun and happy to take part, but Mary looks visibly uncomfortable from the get-go. Is she uncomfortable with the danger involved in drag racing, or is she uncomfortable by the presence of the men? Maybe it's both. The women's car runs off the bridge and the car plummets to the bottom of the river. The women are presumed dead until Mary emerges from the water hours later, seemingly fairly unbothered by the crash. So straight away, the women are punished for something the men initiated. It's not clear as to what exactly caused the crash. The bridge was under construction, but we also see the men lightly bump into the women's car a few times before the crash. But the point isn't really who is at fault, it's who's punished, and it's the women. Seemingly, Mary survives the crash, but as we follow her as she moves to a new town to start a new job as a church organist, she starts to see this ghoulish man following her. This ghoulish man is played by the director Herc Harvey, and while not necessarily menacing in terms of suggesting violence, he is an unsettling figure and one that stalks Mary throughout the film. This man, who reappears throughout Mary's ordeal, is a physical manifestation or representation of death, and this again lends itself to the subtext that Mary's rejection of him is a symbol of threatening the status quo of patriarchal institutions. In other words, fuck the man. It's interesting to consider that his character is, in a weird way, the least threatening man in her afterlife. The priest, the doctor, the guy at the boarding house, they all pose a threat to Mary in one way or another. And while the man looks pretty ghoulish, what he offers her may in fact be the peace of mind she's craving. We're shown how Mary views her job as a church organist as just that, and nothing more. Whereas people have a lot of assumptions of her due to the church. So we're getting into something of an atheistic and rejection of religion subtext. And again, this ties into feminism through the misogyny inherent in organised religion, and also the rejection of the LGBTQ+ community by religions. Once we realise that Mary is in fact dead, and all these references to souls throughout the film, the church and the world around her suddenly become more of a meditation on purgatory and who is allowed to pass into the kingdom of heaven. Mary stays at a boarding house, and this is where we meet John Linden, another boarder who immediately starts hitting on Mary, and Mary is firm but polite in her rejection. This character of Mr. Linden is so recognisable to women. He is your typical man who won't take no for an answer, and his character also brings up some of Mary's sexuality, or indeed lack of sexuality. I know a lot of people have read into the LGBTQ aspect of Mary, and that's a totally valid reading of her character. And it's not a case of, oh, she's not interested in Mr. Linden, so she must be gay. It's more to do with her attitude towards heteronormative standards and her ambivalence towards having a man in her life.
You have a boyfriend here or back home?
No, and I have no desire for one.
Never?
No. I'm surprised to find myself saying that. But it's true. I have no desire for the close company of other people.
Have you always felt this way?
I don't know.
And it's her struggle of coming to terms with who she is, what she wants, and where she wants to go, and the oppressive patriarchal attitudes that battle her every step of the way that really seems to ring true to a lot of people, myself included. Even something as simple as turning down an invitation to meet the church congregation is met with a disapproving warning that she can't live in isolation.
We'll have to have some sort of reception. They want to meet you.
Couldn't we just skip that?
Skip that? Well, I don't suppose it's an absolute necessity. I don't know what some of the ladies will say.
If they say I'm a fine organist, that should be enough, shouldn't it?
Well, yes, of course. We'll let it go at that for the time being. But, my dear, you cannot live in isolation from the human race, you know.
The subtext of the film is elevated due to the character's gender. If we flip the gender to male, would it change the main plot of the film? No. But having the protagonist be a woman does open up the story further and elevates the subtext. Also, side note, her name is Mary Henry, signifying the feminine and masculine. Again, I don't think this is necessarily intentional, but in terms of subtext, it really doesn't add an extra layer to the story. Something readily apparent about the film is the lack of the male gaze. Mary's not objectified by the camera or the audience. There's something about Candice Hilligoss and her somewhat striking appearance that really drew me in. Her big eyes and lashes are just mesmerising. She has a slightly unusual look. There's something ever so slightly mannequin-esque about her face. Her character is the picture of femininity, but her attitudes and behaviours are bucking the trend for what was expected of women at the time. And all because she's a ghost, with wants and needs, but she can't really articulate it, so it all just comes out as apathy and fear. The last third of the film is practically a silent film, and that's also something I wasn't expecting. To have so much time to think about what Mary is going through, how she's feeling, all through the power of her physical performance. And that really speaks to the isolation of the character, and it's a nice touch that I really appreciate. Considering this film was made in 1962 and on a budget of $33,000, it looks pretty fantastic. The sound design, the haunting score by Gene Moore, the nightmarish visuals, the makeup and locations are all really evocative, and honestly, the atmosphere in this film is top-notch creepy goodness. So if you haven't seen the film for a while, I definitely recommend you dig it out and have a rewatch. And I'm so glad that I finally got round to watching Carnival of Souls.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell and leave a comment. There's so much to do on YouTube now. It's crazy. If you really like this video and you'd like to help support this channel, you can buy me a coffee. My hand is not in the frame. It's here. Oh, coffee. I love coffee. That's no secret. And it's a really great way to help support the channel, because I don't have a Patreon or anything like that, because I've only got 250 subscribers or something, so it's not really worth it just yet. But it does really help me. All cat, can you hear that? That's my dog. Oh, she turns into Mae West quite frequently. Oh, how is she though? Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Stay tuned, got more coming, and I will see you all soon. Stay spooky.